Worth it. That's what I said when I got off the record-breaking roller coaster Steel Vengeance. Despite the annoyance of traveling to Ohio, despite the cost of the tickets, despite the hours waiting in the hot sun, it was worth it. It's a fairly insignificant example of the fact that the good things in life often cost us something. Jesus is tapping into this common human experience to make a point about the kingdom of heaven. The pearl of great price, the treasure buried in a field, these things are awesome, but in order to get them, you have to pay for it. And in his examples, it doesn't just cost a lot, but everything. When I was considering that trip to Cedar Point, there were several factors in the decision. First was my experience with other roller coasters. I knew how fun they could be. Second was the stories I had heard from people who had been there and the reviews I had read of that place online. Third, there were the friends who invited me to come along with them, which ensured that I would at least be in good company. All of that gave me enough reason to trust that this exchange of time, money, and discomfort would be worth it after all. And the treasure of the gospel is like that. You can perhaps see some aspect of it, hear about it, recognize that other people have the gospel, but until you pay the price, you do not fully possess it. That's why this man reburies the treasure in the field. Had he just run off with it, he could have been accused of stealing. But like having the mineral rights today, buying that field first meant he could own the field and everything in it without risk of losing it in a lawsuit. When someone first encounters God, when they first come to think, oh, this whole Jesus thing might be real, there's usually joy, like first finding a treasure or seeing the great pearl. But it cannot stop at that joy. It has to translate to making the purchase. Notice that Jesus does not say the person simply buys the field or the pearl with their excess cash. He first has to sell all that he has. A person who lives without Jesus Christ and then discovers Jesus will soon realize that keeping Jesus requires them to change their lives. It might mean giving up certain bad habits or social groups. It could mean changing jobs or moving. It could radically alter a marriage or destabilize connections to family. I just saw the story of a man who gave away millions of dollars so he could become a priest. And that's not even the hardest example we could use. So why do it? Because it's worth it. But how do we know that it's worth it? You don't. That's the crux of the entire Christian life. You are asked, expected to make the greatest of sacrifices based not on knowledge or scientific certainty, but on trust. I say it's not knowledge, but in a certain sense, faith is a kind of knowledge, just not the kind the world is used to. When St. Paul says, we know that all things work for good for those who love God, does he mean he has scientific proof that this works? No. He means the conviction of faith is so strong that it acts like knowledge. But that's a pretty extreme kind of trust and an almost absurd claim. All things work for good for those who love God? You mean everything can benefit those who love God? Stuff like sickness and suffering, wars and corruption and hatred. There is a lot of evil in this world. Does Paul mean that if you love God, even the most evil thing you can imagine will benefit you? Yes. That is really what he means. That is a major part of why the pearl of the gospel is worth selling everything. Nothing else in the universe can promise to make your own death beneficial to you. But the gospel can. Sell everything to get it. Learn to love God above all else, and literally everything can become beneficial to you. Worth it. But how do we trust that? How can anyone bring themselves to make that kind of trade based entirely on trust? Well, we can use the same reasons I gave for my willingness to pay the price of going to that roller coaster: previous experience, the witness of others, and the company of friends. Though nothing can replace your own individual act of faith, these things can help us make that final purchase, the ultimate leap of faith, seem reasonable and doable. Every time you've experienced God, a sense of his presence and answered prayer, witnessing the grace in your own life, it's a foretaste of heaven and divine love. We can reflect on these experiences, draw on the confidence they instill in us, and leverage them to trust God for the things we have not seen work out yet. Previous experience of God's goodness and of his providence are fuel for greater faith, for a more complete purchase of the buried treasure of total surrender to him. So give God the credit for what he's already done, but also strive to trust that goodness so you can extend it to trust the goodness you have not yet seen. There's also the witness of others. Chief among this is the communion of saints. In every generation, there have been men and women of extraordinary love. People whose lives seem impossible in a broken world with broken human nature, but they are real. And when you ask the saints, when you investigate their lives, what you find is that they credit their supernatural love and joy to a supernatural trust in God. They could love freely, risk everything, and sometimes die fearlessly with joy because they trusted a God who could make everything work for their benefit. Consider well their testimony and witness so that it can stir up your own faith to imitate that radical trust, to make that purchase. Finally, there's the company of friends. Though following the gospel will almost certainly cost you friendships, it will provide you with even greater ones. The communion of saints isn't just about the dead holy people who are in heaven now. It's about unity with the body of Christ on earth now. It is one thing to find some camaraderie in a fellow sports fan or some companionship through a shared hobby. Good things these are. But it's quite another to have a friend who would die for you. Our Christian faith literally trains us to lay down our lives for others. You can find no better place to acquire friends of the highest quality and loyalty than a faith that trains them to lay down their lives for their friends. So if you're going to risk everything, pay that price for the pearl of the gospel, you might as well do it with people who will at least go down with you. And really, that one's more of a challenge to us already sitting in the church. If I'm up here telling people to risk everything to follow the gospel, and if I'm saying that the reason they should do it is that Christian friendship makes it possible, what does it mean if we fail to be that kind of friend? In other words, some people are unwilling to pay the price of the gospel because we fail to be the kinds of friends who make that purchase look worthwhile. So be that kind of friend, a friend of Christ, a brother or sister of Jesus who is all in for that buried treasure that is heaven. Remember what God has done for you and renew your trust in the one who works all things for the good of those who love him. Look again at the witness of tens of thousands of canonized saints, men and women who have already paid the price and found it worthwhile. And listen to the invitation of your brothers and sisters in this church and every church who want to pay the price with you. You are already known to God. You have been called by him, predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. This is the treasure you seek, the pearl placed before you. What is it you refuse to sell to gain it? What is worth more than the offer to not only be justified but glorified by the love of this God? This God who saw you lost in your sin and considered you a treasure of such great value that he came to earth and gave everything away to gain you. As Jesus paid the ultimate price on the cross, he looked at you in your worst moment, and do you know what he said? Worth it.